Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The scent of white lilies made me nauseous. They were everywhere, woven into garlands that draped from marble columns, scattered across the polished floor in perfect patterns, tucked into elaborate arrangements that lined the ceremonial hall like silent witnesses. Someone had told me once that lilies symbolized purity, devotion, eternity. All I could smell was the cloying sweetness that reminded me of funerals, of endings rather than beginnings. I stood in the preparation chamber, staring at my reflection in the floor-length mirror, and barely recognized myself. The wedding gown was exquisite. Layers of silk and lace that cascaded like moonlight, hand-embroidered with silver thread that caught the afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows. The bodice fit perfectly, cinched at my waist before flowing outward in a train that would require 2 attendants to carry. My pale blonde hair had been swept into an elaborate updo, tiny diamonds woven throughout like captured starlight. I looked like a princess from a storybook. I felt like a sacrifice. "You look beautiful, darling." My mother's voice came from behind me, soft and strained. When I met her eyes in the mirror, I saw the same resignation I felt lodged in my own chest. She stood with her hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white, trying to smile through the grief of what we both knew this day represented. "I'm 18, Mama." My voice came out smaller than I intended, almost childlike. "I'm only 18. She crossed the room quickly, her own simple dress rustling as she wrapped her arms around me from behind, careful not to disturb the careful arrangement of fabric and jewels. "I know, sweetheart. I know." What she didn't say hung between us like the heavy perfume of those damned lilies. But we have no choice. Our pack was small, barely 200 wolves scattered across the northern mountains. We'd survived for generations by staying hidden, keeping to ourselves, avoiding the politics and power plays of the larger territories. But survival had come at a cost. We were weak, vulnerable, and when the neighboring pack had begun encroaching on our lands last winter, there had been nothing we could do to stop them, nothing except offer up the one thing they wanted: me. Not because I was special, or powerful, or particularly beautiful, though the council had tried to frame it that way when they'd presented the opportunity to my parents. No, I was valuable for one reason only: I was an Omega. A rarity among our kind, even more so in a pack as small as ours. Omegas were supposed to be treasures, cherished and protected. In reality, we were often currency, bargaining chips in treaties and alliances. And the Alpha King who ruled the vast Crescent Moon territory had demanded an Omega bride to seal the protection pact that would save my people from annihilation. He was 40 years old. I'd never seen him. I knew nothing about him except whispered rumors that painted him as cold, calculating, ruthless in battle, and even more ruthless in politics. They said he'd lost his first mate 20 years ago and had never taken another. They said his eyes were the color of winter storms and just as unforgiving. They said he ruled his kingdom with absolute authority, that even his own council feared him. They said a lot of things. None of them made the tight band of terror around my chest loosen even a fraction. "Your grandmother would be proud of you." My mother's words pulled me back to the present. She reached up to touch the silver pendant hanging at my throat, a delicate wolf pressed into moonstone, the only jewelry I'd insisted on wearing despite the elaborate diamonds they'd tried to drape across my neck. She always said that true strength isn't about dominance or power. It's about endurance, about surviving when the world wants you to break. I remembered my grandmother's weathered hands, the way she'd held this very pendant out to me on her deathbed 3 years ago. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, little one," she'd whispered, her voice already fading into whatever waited beyond. "It's being terrified and choosing kindness anyway. Remember that." I'd been 15 then, still dreaming of finding my fated mate. of falling in love naturally, of having a choice in my own future. How naive I'd been. A sharp knock at the door made us both startle. "It's time!" A male voice called through the heavy wood. One of the royal guards who'd been stationed outside since dawn, ensuring I didn't run. As if I could. As if I would abandon my family, my pack, everyone I loved, to the violence that would surely follow if I broke this treaty. My mother's arms tightened around me for one more moment, and I felt her tears against my bare shoulder. "I love you," she breathed. "No matter what happens, you are my daughter, and I love you." Then she released me and stepped back, straightening her spine, wiping her eyes with shaking fingers. She was an alpha's daughter herself, trained from birth to show no weakness, but I'd seen the cracks, and they would haunt me. The doors opened. The ceremony hall stretched before me like a gilded cage. Hundreds of wolves packed the space. Members of the Crescent Moon Pack, dignitaries from allied territories. The entire power structure of the werewolf world condensed into one overwhelming display of wealth and dominance. The air itself felt thick with alpha pheromones, making my omega instincts scream at me to lower my eyes, make myself small, submit. I lifted my chin instead. My father waited at the entrance to walk me down the aisle, looking older than I'd ever seen him. His hand trembled slightly when I took his arm, but his voice was steady when he whispered, "Breathe, sweetheart. Just breathe." The music began, something classical and ceremonial that seemed to echo off the vaulted ceiling. We started forward, my heels clicking against marble, the train of my dress whispering behind us like a ghost. Faces blurred on either side, some curious, some pitying, some coldly calculating as they assessed the Omega who would now be their queen. I focused on the altar ahead, where the officiant stood in traditional robes, the ancient texts open before him. And then I saw him. He stood at the altar with his back partially turned, speaking in low tones to a tall man beside him, likely his beta, or second in command. Even from a distance, his presence was overwhelming. He wore black formal attire that emphasized his powerful build, shoulders broad enough to block out the light from the windows behind him. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, cut short and precise. When he shifted, I caught the edge of his profile, sharp jaw, strong features, the bearing of someone who'd commanded armies and never questioned his own authority. Then he turned fully toward the aisle, toward me, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. His eyes were indeed the color of storms, gray-blue and intense, framed by dark lashes that should have softened his features, but somehow made them more striking. They locked onto mine across the distance, and I felt the impact like a physical thing, like lightning seeking ground. For a moment, just a heartbeat, something flickered across his expression. Surprise? Recognition? Something too quick to name before his features settled back into careful neutrality. But I'd seen it. My grandmother's pendant grew warm against my skin, and I remembered her words. Choose kindness, even when you're terrified. The walk down that aisle felt eternal and impossibly short all at once. My father's grip on my arm was the only thing keeping me grounded as we passed row after row of watching wolves. I could feel their assessments, their judgments, the weight of their expectations settling onto my shoulders like stones. We reached the altar. My father stopped, turned to me with eyes that held a lifetime of apology and love. He kissed my forehead gently, lingering for just a moment, then placed my hand in the Alpha King's. The contact sent electricity racing up my arm. His hand was larger than mine, calloused and warm, and for just a second his fingers tightened. Not in possession, but in something that felt almost like reassurance. Then his expression remained unreadable, as he guided me up the 2 steps to stand beside him, facing the officiant. "Dearly beloved," the old wolf began, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "We are gathered here to witness the union of Alpha King Dmitry Volkov of the Crescent Moon Pack and Omega Elena Hartley of the Northern Ridge Pack." Elena. My name sounded foreign in this formal context, like it belonged to someone else. The girl who'd climbed trees and run wild through mountain meadows felt very far away from the young woman in the elaborate wedding gown, standing beside a man old enough to have lived half a life before she was even born. The officiant droned on about duty, honor, the sacred bonds of pack and partnership. I tried to focus on his words, but my awareness kept sliding sideways to the man beside me. He stood perfectly still, his posture impeccable, his expression giving away nothing. But I could feel the heat radiating from him, sense the carefully controlled power that thrummed beneath his skin. This was the man who would own me now, who could command me with his alpha voice, demand my submission, take whatever he wanted because I was his by treaty and law and tradition. The thought made my stomach turn. "The rings," the officiant intoned. The beta stepped forward, the tall man I'd noticed earlier, with kind eyes and brown hair touched with gray. He held out a velvet cushion bearing 2 rings, a thick platinum band and a more delicate one studded with small diamonds that caught the light. Dimitri, I had to start thinking of him by name, took the smaller ring and turned to face me fully. This close, I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the silver threaded more heavily through his dark hair than I'd initially noticed. He was handsome in a severe, almost harsh way, like a mountain carved by wind and time into something formidable. "Your hand," he said quietly. It was the first time I'd heard his voice directed at me, deep, slightly rough, with an accent that spoke of education and authority. Not unkind, but not warm either. Neutral, controlled. I raised my left hand, hating that it trembled slightly. His fingers closed around mine, gentle, surprisingly careful, and he slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, because of course it did. Everything about this day had been planned and orchestrated down to the smallest detail. I, Dmitri Volkov, take you, Elena Hartley, as my mate and queen, he said, the traditional words carrying across the silent hall. To protect and provide for, to honor and respect, from this day until the last of my days. The words were beautiful. They were also empty, I told myself. A formula, a requirement. But when his eyes met mine as he spoke them, there was something in that storm-gray gaze that made my breath catch. Something that looked almost like an oath, a promise given weight by his will alone. Then it was my turn. I took his ring from the cushion, my fingers barely steady, and reached for his left hand. He offered it without hesitation, palm up, and I was struck by the scars I saw there. Thin white lines crossing his palm and fingers, marks of battles fought and survived. This was not a man who led from safety. This was a warrior king. I, Elena Hartley, take you, Dmitri Volkov, as my mate and king. My voice was softer than his, but it didn't shake. Grandmother's pendant pulsed warm against my heart, to stand beside and support, to honor and respect, from this day until the last of my days. I slid the ring onto his finger, and something in his expression shifted again. That same flicker of something almost vulnerable before control reasserted itself. By the power vested in me by the ancient laws and the moon herself, the officiant declared, I pronounce you bound as mates, joined as one. May your union bring strength to your packs, and prosperity to your line. He paused, then added with the faintest smile, You may seal the bond. My heart stopped. I'd known this was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. Dmitri turned to face me fully, his hands coming up to gently cup my face. His palms were warm against my cheeks, his touch far gentler than I'd expected from a man of his reputation. Breathe, he murmured, so quietly only I could hear. Just breathe. The same words my father had spoken, but they landed differently coming from him. Then he leaned down and kissed me. It was chaste, appropriate for the public ceremony. Just a soft press of his lips against mine, lasting only a few seconds. But in that brief contact, I felt the full force of what had just happened. I was bound now, mated, his. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine for something I didn't understand. The hall erupted in applause and howls, the traditional celebration of a mating, but all I could feel was the imprint of his lips still burning against mine, and the terrifying uncertainty of what came next. The reception was held in the palace's grand ballroom, a space so vast it could have swallowed my entire pack's territory whole. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the ceiling, casting prismatic light across walls draped in midnight blue silk. Tables laden with more food than I'd seen in my lifetime lined the perimeter, and a string orchestra played softly from a raised platform, the music weaving through conversations like water through stones. I sat beside Dmitri at the head table, elevated above the crowd, on display like a museum piece. He'd barely spoken to me since the ceremony ended. His attention was consumed by an endless stream of pack leaders and dignitaries who approached to offer congratulations, or more accurately, to assess the new queen, and judge whether this alliance made them more or less secure in their own positions. I could feel their eyes dissecting me, weighing my worth, finding me wanting. Too young, too small, too weak to be queen of the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories. They weren't wrong. "You should eat something," Dmitri said quietly, breaking nearly an hour of silence between us. He gestured to my untouched plate, laden with delicacies I couldn't begin to identify. "It's going to be a long evening. I'm not hungry." The words came out sharper than I intended, edged with the fear I'd been swallowing since dawn. Something flickered across his expression. Not anger, but something more complicated. He turned in his chair to face me more directly, his movement drawing the attention of several nearby wolves. They quickly looked away, but I felt their awareness like pressure against my skin. "Elena." My name in his deep voice sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "I know this isn't—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I know today has been overwhelming, but you need to maintain your strength. Please." The please surprised me. Alpha Kings didn't say please, especially not to Omega brides they'd essentially purchased through treaty negotiations. I looked at him properly then, really looked, and saw what I'd missed in my own fear and misery. There were shadows under his eyes, tension in the set of his shoulders despite his perfect posture. His jaw was tight, a muscle jumping there as if he was clenching his teeth. He looked tired. Not physically, but in some deeper way, as if he'd been tired for a very long time. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Choose kindness, even when you're terrified." I picked up my fork and took a small bite of something that tasted of lemon and herbs. It was delicious, but it might as well have been ash for all the pleasure I took from it. Dimitri's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Thank you." Before I could respond, a woman approached the table, tall and elegant, with dark hair streaked with silver, and eyes that assessed me with cool intelligence. She wore a deep burgundy gown that spoke of wealth and taste, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone used to power. "My king." She inclined her head respectfully to Dmitri, then turned that sharp gaze on me. "My queen. I am Irina Volkov, the king's sister and advisor to the council. I wanted to offer my personal congratulations on your union." Sister. I hadn't known he had a sister. But then, I knew almost nothing about the man I'd just married beyond rumors and reputation. "Thank you," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Irina's eyes lingered on me for a long moment, and I couldn't read what I saw there. Not hostility exactly, but certainly not warmth. "You're very young," she said finally, and though her tone was neutral, the words felt like an indictment. "Irina." Dimitri's voice carried a warning note. "I simply mean that adjustment will take time." Irina smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The responsibilities of a queen are substantial. "I'm sure we'll be seeing quite a lot of each other as you learn your duties." She paused, then added, "I've prepared a schedule for your first week. We'll begin your education tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp." It wasn't a question or an offer. It was a command wrapped in courtesy. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? Irina nodded, satisfied, and swept away to rejoin a group of older wolves who watched our exchange with barely concealed interest. "Don't let her intimidate you," Dmitri said quietly once she was out of earshot. "Irina means well, even if her methods are direct. She thinks I'm a child playing dress-up." I kept my voice low, but I couldn't quite mask the bitterness. She thinks everyone is a child compared to her. There was the faintest hint of amusement in his tone, so subtle I almost missed it. "My sister is 2 years older than me, and has never let me forget it. She's also the most competent administrator I've ever known. Listen to her advice, but don't let her bully you." I glanced at him, surprised by the frankness. He was looking out at the crowd, his expression once again neutral and controlled, but something in the way he'd spoken felt almost conspiratorial, as if he and I were on the same side. The thought was dangerous. I couldn't afford to let my guard down, to start believing that this arrangement was anything other than what it was, a transaction, a treaty sealed with my life. The evening dragged on. More people approached with congratulations that felt like examinations. I smiled until my face hurt, answered questions as briefly as courtesy allowed, and tried not to think about what would happen when the reception finally ended, when we would be alone. The thought sat in my stomach like ice, growing heavier with each passing hour. I'd been raised to understand what mating meant, what would be expected of me. My mother had tried to prepare me in the days leading up to the ceremony. Her words clinical and uncomfortable, both of us pretending this was normal, natural, right. But the truth was simple and terrifying. Tonight, this stranger would claim me, would mark me, would make me his in every way that mattered to our kind. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Elena. Dimitri's voice pulled me from the spiral of my thoughts. I looked up to find him watching me with those storm-gray eyes, and for just a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked enough for me to see something that looked like concern. "It's time," he said quietly. My heart lurched into my throat. Around us, I noticed that the crowd had thinned considerably. The orchestra had stopped playing. The evening had worn down to its inevitable conclusion. Dimitri stood and offered me his hand. I took it because I had no choice, my fingers ice cold against his warm palm. He helped me to my feet, and the few remaining guests erupted in knowing smiles and barely concealed leers. The walk through the palace felt like a death march. Dimitri guided me through corridors I'd never seen, past guards who bowed as we passed, up a grand staircase that seemed to stretch forever. He didn't speak, and neither did I. What was there to say? We reached a set of double doors carved with intricate wolf designs. The royal chambers, I realized. His rooms. Now our rooms. He pushed the doors open and gestured for me to enter first. The suite was enormous, decorated in deep blues and silvers that echoed the ballroom's color scheme. A sitting area with plush furniture faced a fireplace where flames danced and crackled. Through an archway, I could see the bedroom, and the massive four-poster bed that dominated the space. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. I stood frozen in the center of the room, my elaborate gown suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My heart hammered so hard I was certain he could hear it. Dimitri moved past me to a sideboard, where crystal decanters caught the firelight. He poured amber liquid into 2 glasses, then turned and offered one to me. "You're terrified," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I didn't know how to respond to such directness, so I said nothing, staring at the glass in his hand like it might bite me. He set both glasses down and took several steps back, putting distance between us. "Elena, look at me. Please." Slowly, I lifted my eyes to his face. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. And the gentleness in his voice was somehow worse than coldness would have been, because it threatened to undo the fragile control I'd maintained all day. "I know what you must be thinking, what you've been dreading all evening, but I need you to understand something." He paused, seeming to choose his words with great care. "This marriage was arranged for political purposes. I'm fully aware that you had no choice in the matter, that you were essentially sold to me to protect your pack." His jaw tightened. "I won't pretend to like the circumstances, but I also won't compound the injustice by forcing you into my bed before you're ready." I stared at him, certain I'd misunderstood. "What?" "I'm saying that nothing will happen tonight that you don't want to happen." He gestured to the archway leading to the bedroom. "That's your space. You'll find everything you need there, night clothes, personal items, anything my staff thought you might require. I'll sleep out here on the couch, but the treaty, the bond, don't we have to—" I couldn't finish the sentence, heat flooding my cheeks. "The treaty requires a marriage, which we've fulfilled. The bond—" He rubbed the back of his neck, a surprisingly human gesture from someone who seemed so controlled. "The bond will develop in its own time, if it develops at all. There's no requirement for it to be consummated tonight. People can expect whatever they want." There was steel in his voice now, the king reasserting himself. What happens between us is no one's business but ours. And I won't have our first night together be something you endure out of duty. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't what I'd prepared myself for. All day, I'd been bracing for violation, for the loss of what little control I had left. And now he was giving it back? Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Dmitri was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant, looking at something I couldn't see. 22 years ago, I made a promise to someone very important to me. I promised that I would never use my position or power to take away someone's choice, their agency. His gaze refocused on me, and the pain I saw there was raw and real. I've broken many promises in my life, Elena, but not that one. Never that one. His first mate, I realized. He was talking about his first mate. You should rest, he said, his tone gentling again. It's been an impossibly long day, and tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Irina wasn't exaggerating about the schedule she's prepared for you. I nodded numbly, still trying to process what was happening. Dmitri picked up one of the glasses he'd poured and carried it to a chair by the fire, settling into it with the exhausted grace of someone who'd been standing for hours. Good night, Elena, he said quietly, not looking at me. Good night, I whispered back. I fled to the bedroom, closing the door behind me with shaking hands. The room was beautiful, all soft blues and silvers, with a bed so large I could have fit my entire family in it. Someone had laid out a nightgown on the pristine coverlet, simple white cotton that looked blessedly comfortable compared to the elaborate wedding dress. I changed mechanically, my fingers fumbling with the countless buttons and fasteners. When I was finally free of the gown, I left it pooled on the floor and crawled into the bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. Through the door, I could hear the soft sounds of Dmitri moving around the sitting room, the creak of furniture, the pop of the fire, the clink of glass against wood. I'd expected a monster tonight, a man who would take what he believed was his right, who would use me and discard my feelings as irrelevant. Instead, I'd found something far more dangerous. A man who might actually be kind. And kindness, I was learning, was infinitely harder to armor myself against than cruelty. I touched my grandmother's pendant, still warm against my skin, and let the tears I'd been holding back all day finally fall into the silk pillowcase. Tomorrow, I would have to learn how to be a queen. Tomorrow, I would have to navigate the politics and dangers of this new life. Tomorrow, I would have to figure out what it meant to be married to a man who treated me with more respect than my own pack council had. But tonight, I would allow myself this, grief for the life I'd lost, fear of the future I couldn't see, and the dangerous, terrifying seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be the prison I'd imagined. Outside, the moon rose full and bright, casting silver light across the room, and somewhere in the distance, wolves howled their ancient songs to the night sky. 3 weeks passed in a blur of lessons, protocol, and careful distance. True to her word, Irina appeared at my door every morning at precisely 9 o'clock, armed with schedules, historical texts, and a seemingly endless list of things a queen needed to know. Pack lineages stretching back centuries, trade agreements with neighboring territories, the delicate balance of power that kept the werewolf world from descending into chaos, which families could be trusted, which required careful watching, which harbored old grudges that could ignite into violence with the wrong word or gesture. My head spun with information, but I absorbed it all with desperate focus. If I had to be queen, I would at least be competent. Dmitri I saw mostly at formal dinners, surrounded by advisors and visiting dignitaries. He was unfailingly polite, asking about my day, ensuring I had everything I needed. But there was a wall between us, careful, deliberate, as impenetrable as the palace gates. He kept his promise about the sleeping arrangements. Every night, he retired to the couch in the sitting room while I took the bedroom, and every morning I woke to find him already gone, off to attend to the countless demands of ruling. We were married, but we were strangers. I told myself I was grateful for the distance. I told myself it was easier this way, safer to keep my heart locked away where it couldn't be bruised by false hope or shattered by inevitable disappointment. I told myself many lies in those first weeks, It was during breakfast on the 22nd day, I'd been counting, that everything changed. I sat alone in the small dining room adjacent to our chambers, picking at fruit and toast, while reviewing notes Irina had given me about the upcoming harvest festival. Dmitri had already left for an early council meeting, his side of the table cleared away, only the lingering scent of his coffee and the morning paper he'd been reading suggesting he'd been there at all. The door burst open without warning. A man strode in, tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy hair and hazel eyes that sparkled with barely contained energy. He wore training clothes splattered with mud, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone utterly comfortable in his own skin. "Where's Dmitri hiding?" he demanded, then stopped short when he saw me. His eyes widened. Oh, you're the queen. Elena, right?" I set down my teacup carefully, my heart racing at the unexpected intrusion. "I am. And you are?" "Rude, apparently." He grinned, completely unabashed, and sketched an exaggerated bow. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I'm Sebastian, Dimitri's beta and oldest friend. I've been away dealing with a territorial dispute on the western border, and only got back this morning." He pulled out a chair without invitation and dropped into it, studying me with unnerving directness. "So you're the reason Dimitri's been walking around like a bear with a thorn in its paw. What? Brooding. Snapping at people. Staring into space during meetings." Sebastian ticked off items on his fingers. "I've known the man for 30 years, and I haven't seen him this tied up in knots since—" He stopped abruptly, seeming to catch himself. "Since his first mate died," I finished quietly. Sebastian's expression softened. "He told you about Natalia?" "Not much. Just that he made her a promise." I twisted my napkin in my lap. "He's keeping that promise with me. The marriage is political. Nothing more. Nothing more." Sebastian repeated the words slowly, then laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "Is that what he told you?" "It's what we both know." I lifted my chin, defensive. I was sold to secure a treaty. He needed an omega to strengthen his bloodline and political position. It's transactional. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, studying me with eyes that seemed to see far too much. "You know what I think? I think you're both idiots." I blinked, shocked by his bluntness. "Excuse me?" "Dimitri's out there drowning in guilt because he thinks he's trapped you in a cage. You're in here building walls to protect yourself from a man who would rather sleep on a couch for the rest of his life than make you uncomfortable." He shook his head. "Meanwhile, the whole damn pack can see what you two are too stubborn or scared to admit. And what's that?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "That there's something real between you. Something that could be extraordinary if either of you had the courage to reach for it." My throat tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" Sebastian leaned forward, his voice gentling. "Elena, I've known Dmitri since we were 10 years old. I was there when he met Natalia, watched them fall in love, stood beside him when she died. I saw what grief did to him, how it carved out pieces of him that never grew back." He paused. "And I've watched him these past 3 weeks. And you know what I see? I see a man waking up, coming back to life, and it terrifies him. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was saying because it was too much, too dangerous to hope for. He thinks he's too old for you," Sebastian continued. "Thinks he's damaged goods, that you deserve someone whole and uncomplicated. He's convinced himself that the kindest thing he can do is keep his distance. Let you have your freedom within this arrangement." His eyes held mine. "But every time you walk into a room, he watches you like you're the sun, and he's been living in darkness for 20 years. Stop." The word came out broken. "Please, just stop." Sebastian stood, and his expression was kind now, understanding. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help 2 people I care about find their way to each other before pride and fear ruin something that could be beautiful." He headed for the door, then paused. "He'll be in the training grounds this afternoon. South Courtyard, around 3. If you wanted to accidentally wander by." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the ruins of my carefully constructed defenses. I spent the rest of the morning unable to focus on anything. Irina's lesson about trade negotiations washed over me like meaningless noise. I smiled and nodded in the right places. But my mind was miles away, circling Sebastian's words like a wolf circling prey. Every time you walk into a room, he watches you like you're the sun. Was it true? Or was Sebastian seeing what he wanted to see, trying to play matchmaker between two people bound by duty rather than choice? At 2:30, I found myself walking through the palace gardens, my feet carrying me toward the south courtyard before I'd consciously decided to go. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and the scent of late summer roses filled the air. I could hear sounds of combat ahead. The clash of practice weapons, shouts of encouragement and instruction, the primal energy of wolves in their element. I rounded a corner and stopped. The training grounds spread before me. A large, open space surrounded by high walls, with weapons racks along one side and various training equipment scattered throughout. A dozen wolves sparred in pairs, their movements fast and brutal despite the blunted practice weapons. I recognized a few faces from court functions, but my attention fixed immediately on the man in the center, Dimitri. He'd stripped down to just training pants and boots, his torso bare and gleaming with sweat in the afternoon sun. I'd known intellectually that he was strong. You couldn't rule the largest pack in the Northern Territories without physical power to back up political authority, but knowing and seeing were different things. He moved with lethal grace, circling a younger wolf who attacked with impressive speed and aggression. Dimitri deflected each strike easily, almost lazily, his body flowing like water around stone. Then he countered, a blur of motion too fast to fully track, and suddenly the younger wolf was on the ground, Dimitri's practice blade at his throat. "Better," Dimitri said, offering a hand to help the young man up. "Your footwork is improving, but you're still telegraphing your strikes." Again, they reset, and I found myself unable to look away. This was a different side of him, not the controlled king who sat through endless council meetings, but a warrior in his element, powerful, dangerous. Alive in a way I'd never seen him. He must have sensed me watching because his head turned sharply in my direction. Our eyes met across the courtyard, and the young wolf he'd been training took advantage of his distraction to land a blow that would have been devastating if the weapons had been real. Dimitri barely seemed to notice. He said something to his sparring partner. I was too far away to hear, then crossed the courtyard toward me with long, purposeful strides. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch him approach with my heart hammering against my ribs. "Elena." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the sheen of sweat on his skin, the way his chest rose and fell with exertion. "Is everything all right? Did something happen?" "No, I struggled to find words that wouldn't reveal too much. I was walking and heard the training. I've never seen the grounds before." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, pleasure, uncertainty. "Would you like a tour?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He grabbed a towel from a nearby bench and wiped the sweat from his face and neck, then gestured for me to follow him. We walked along the perimeter of the training area, and he explained the various stations and equipment with the same careful courtesy he always showed me. But there was something different now, a tension that hadn't been there before. Or maybe had always been there, but I'd been too guarded to notice. "Sebastian came to see me this morning," I said suddenly, the words escaping before I could think better of them. Dimitri's steps faltered for just a fraction. "Did he?" "I should have warned you about him. Sebastian has no sense of boundaries or propriety. He cares about you. That's one word for it." A hint of dry humor colored his tone. What did my meddlesome beta say? I stopped walking, forcing him to stop as well and turn to face me. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, and around us, the sounds of training had faded as wolves paused to watch their king with obvious curiosity. "He said we're both idiots," I said quietly. Dimitri's eyes widened fractionally. "I see. He said you're drowning in guilt, that you think you trapped me." I took a breath, my grandmother's pendant warm against my skin. "He said you watch me like I'm the sun." For a long moment, Dimitri said nothing. His jaw worked, that muscle jumping again the way it did when he was clenching his teeth. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Sebastian talks too much." Is he wrong? The question hung between us like a blade balanced on its edge. Around us, I was peripherally aware that training had completely stopped. Every wolf in the courtyard blatantly watching now. But I couldn't bring myself to care about propriety or appearances. I needed to know. Dimitri ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that made him look younger, more vulnerable. Elena, you're 18 years old. You should be exploring the world, finding your own path, discovering who you are beyond what others expect of you. His voice dropped lower. Instead, you're trapped in a marriage you never wanted, with a man more than twice your age, learning to be queen of a kingdom you never asked for. That doesn't answer my question. It's the only answer I can give. He stepped closer, and suddenly the air between us felt charged, electric, because the truth is complicated and dangerous, and entirely unfair to you. Let me decide what's fair. My heart was racing now, but I held my ground. I'm tired of everyone making decisions for me, protecting me from truths they think I can't handle. I'm stronger than I look. Something in his expression cracked. That careful control splintering at the edges. I know you are. I've watched you endure Irina's brutal education schedule without complaint. I've seen you navigate court politics with grace that takes most people decades to develop. I've watched you choose kindness when cruelty would be easier. His hand lifted, hovering near my face but not quite touching. You're remarkable, Elena, and that's exactly why I need to keep my distance. Why? I whispered. Because I'm falling in love with you. The words came out raw, torn from somewhere deep, and you deserve someone who can give you a real choice, not someone you're bound to by treaty and obligation. You deserve to be free. The world tilted. Around us, I heard several sharp intakes of breath from the watching wolves, but they seemed very far away. All I could see was Dimitri's face, the naked vulnerability in his storm-gray eyes, the way he was looking at me like I was something precious and terrifying all at once. What if I don't want to be free? The words escaped before I could examine them, before I could protect myself. What if I want... A horn blast shattered the moment. 3 sharp notes, the alarm signal. Dimitri's head snapped toward the sound, his entire body going rigid. Around us, the warriors dropped their practice weapons and sprinted toward the weapons racks, grabbing real blades with practiced efficiency. Sebastian appeared from nowhere, already armed, his earlier levity replaced by deadly focus. Rogues, eastern perimeter, at least 20, get Elena to safety. Dimitri's voice was pure command now. The vulnerable man from moments ago vanished beneath layers of alpha authority. Full lockdown protocol. I can fight, I started, but Dimitri cut me off. No. He gripped my shoulders, his eyes blazing. Please, Elena, I need to know you're safe. Then he was gone, running toward the eastern wall with his warriors, and Sebastian was gripping my arm, pulling me back toward the palace. But as I ran, my heart pounding with fear and adrenaline and the echo of words I'd never expected to hear, one thought blazed through my mind. He loves me. And everything had just become infinitely more complicated. The safe room was buried deep in the palace's foundation, a windowless chamber lined with steel-reinforced stone, stocked with supplies and weapons, accessible only through a hidden passage behind the library. Sebastian had practically dragged me through the corridors, ignoring my protests, his grip on my arm gentle but unyielding. Now I sat on a bench along the wall, surrounded by a dozen other wolves deemed too valuable or vulnerable to risk in combat. Mostly Omega females, a few elderly council members, and Irina, who paced the length of the room like a caged panther, her elegant gown swishing with each agitated turn. This is ridiculous, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. 20 rogues shouldn't require a full lockdown. Something's wrong. What do you mean? I asked, grateful for any distraction from the images my mind kept conjuring. Dimitri facing impossible odds, bleeding, falling, dying before I ever had the chance to tell him that I might be falling too. Irina stopped pacing and fixed me with those sharp eyes. Rogues travel in small packs, 5 or 6 at most. They're scavengers, opportunists. They don't organize into groups of 20 and attack fortified positions. She resumed her pacing. This is either a diversion or a coordinated assault. Neither option is good. My stomach twisted. A diversion from what? That's the question. Irina's jaw tightened. If I were planning an attack on this palace, I'd use a rogue assault to draw out the warriors, then strike at the heart while defenses were depleted. You mean here? The words came out flat. They might be coming for the safe room. It's what I would do. Irina moved to the weapons rack mounted on the far wall, selecting a sword with practiced ease. Several other wolves followed her example, arming themselves with whatever they could wield. The elderly council members looked terrified but determined. The Omega females, most younger than me, gathered together, their fear perfuming the air with a scent like copper and rain. I stood, my mind racing. Is there another way out? An emergency tunnel that leads to the forest, but it's sealed from the outside. We'd need someone on the other end to open it. Irina tested the weight of her blade. And if I'm right about this being a coordinated attack, they'll have people waiting at that exit, so we're trapped. We're fortified. Irina's correction was sharp. There's a difference. This door is designed to withstand sustained assault. They'd need explosives or siege equipment to breach it, and by then, Dmitri will have finished with the rogues and returned. She met my eyes. My brother is many things, but careless with those under his protection is not one of them. He'll come. He loves me. The thought blazed through me again, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. 3 weeks ago, I'd believed I was marrying a cold, calculating king who saw me as a political asset, but the man who'd looked at me in the training yard, who'd confessed his feelings with such raw honesty, who'd made me promise to stay safe before running toward danger, that man was something else entirely. And I hadn't told him, hadn't said the words that were crystallizing in my heart with startling clarity. I'd been so focused on protecting myself, on maintaining distance, that I'd never considered what I might be giving up. The thought of never having the chance to tell him felt like drowning. There has to be something we can do, I said, more to myself than Irina. We can't just sit here and hope. What do you suggest? Irina's tone was challenging but not dismissive. You've been queen for 3 weeks. You have no combat training, no experience with tactical situations, no... I have a brain. The words came out sharper than intended, fueled by fear and frustration. And I'm tired of being treated like a fragile decoration. You said yourself this might be a diversion. If they're trying to draw Dmitri away from the palace, then the smartest thing we could do is make sure he knows it's a trap before he walks into it. Irina's eyes narrowed. The communications room is 3 floors up and halfway across the palace. You'd never make it. Not if I go alone. I turned to face the others in the room. But if we work together, create our own diversion, maybe... An explosion rocked the foundation. The reinforced door shuddered but held. Dust rained from the ceiling, and several wolves screamed. Through the thick steel, I could hear sounds of combat, snarls, clashes of weapons, the distinctive crack of bones breaking. They'd found us. Irina was already moving, organizing the armed wolves into a defensive formation. Behind me, she commanded the unarmed. If they breach the door, you run for the emergency tunnel. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understood? Another explosion. Closer this time. The door groaned under the impact, and I saw hairline cracks splintering across the steel reinforcement. They had explosives. They were going to get through. I moved to Irina's side, and she thrust a short blade into my hands without looking at me. Stay behind me, she ordered. When they breach, aim for soft spots, throat, belly, beneath the arms. Don't try to be heroic, just survive. My fingers closed around the weapon's grip, and I felt the weight of it settle into my palm. I'd never held a real weapon before, never trained for combat, never imagined I'd need to. But as I stared at that cracking door, I felt something shift inside me, a core of steel I hadn't known existed. I thought of my grandmother, who'd survived wars and hardship I could barely imagine. I thought of my mother's quiet strength, the way she'd endured an arranged marriage to my father, and somehow built a life worth living. I thought of Dmitri, running toward danger to protect his people. To protect me. Choose kindness, even when you're terrified. But sometimes, kindness means fighting. The door exploded inward. Rogues poured through the gap, wild-eyed and feral, their clothes ragged, their weapons crude but effective. They moved with the desperate violence of wolves with nothing to lose, and they outnumbered us 3-1. Irina met them head-on, her blade flashing in the artificial light. She moved like water and lightning combined, every strike precise and devastating. 2 rogues fell before they'd made it 5 steps into the room, but there were too many. I saw an elderly council member go down, a rogue's claws raking across his chest. Saw one of the young Omega females dragged screaming toward the door. Saw the defensive line buckling under the sheer weight of numbers, and I moved. The blade in my hand felt like an extension of my arm as I drove it forward, catching a rogue who'd been circling toward Irina's blind side. The impact jarred through me, and the rogue howled, spinning to face me with murder in his eyes. Terror flooded my system, but I didn't freeze. I ducked under his retaliatory swipe, the movement pure instinct, and lashed out with the blade again. This time I aimed for his leg, remembering Irina's advice about soft spots. The blade bit deep, and the rogue stumbled. "Elena," Irina's voice cut through the chaos. "Get back." But I couldn't. Another rogue had broken through, heading straight for the cluster of unarmed Omega females huddled against the far wall. I didn't think, didn't plan, just threw myself between them and the threat. The rogue was bigger than me, stronger, his breath hot and rank as he loomed over me. But when our eyes met, something strange happened. His advance faltered. His aggressive posture shifted, uncertainty flickering across his feral features. My Omega nature, I realized. Even rogues responded to it on some primal level. "Stop," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. I didn't use command. I couldn't. Omegas didn't have that power. But I poured every ounce of calm authority I could muster into the word. "You don't want to do this." The rogue tilted his head, confusion replacing rage. Behind him, I could see the battle still raging. But in this small pocket, time seemed to slow. "You're hungry," I continued, reading the gauntness in his frame, the desperation in his eyes. "Desperate. Someone promised you food, safety, if you attacked us. But that person lied. You're being used." "Shut up," the rogue snarled, but his conviction wavered. "Look around." I gestured to the chaos, to his fallen comrades. "You're dying for someone else's ambition. Is that really how you want this to end?" For a heartbeat, I thought I'd reached him. His weapon lowered fractionally, uncertainty warring with hunger and rage in his expression. Then another explosion shook the room. This one from somewhere above us, deeper in the palace. The rogue's head snapped up, and something like triumph flashed across his face. "Too late," he growled. "The king falls tonight." Ice flooded my veins. "What did you do?" But he was already moving, lunging past me toward the door, using the confusion to escape. Several other rogues followed, abandoning the fight in the safe room to run back up the passage. It was a diversion. All of it. The attack on the eastern perimeter, the assault on the safe room, all designed to scatter our forces while the real threat struck at Dmitri directly. "Irina!" I shouted over the sounds of combat. "It's a trap! They're going after Dmitri!" Irina drove her blade through the last rogue standing between us and dispatched him with brutal efficiency. Blood spattered her elegant gown, and her hair had come loose from its careful arrangement, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "How do you know?" "The rogue," he said. Another explosion cut me off, this one definitely from the upper floors. "We have to warn him. The communications room is too far." I was already moving toward the door, my decision made. "I'll go. You stay here. Protect the others in case more come." "Absolutely not." Irina grabbed my arm. "You have no combat training, no weapons beyond that blade, and you don't even know the layout of the palace well enough to navigate during an attack." "Then come with me, or send someone who can fight." I met her eyes, letting her see the steel that had crystallized in my core. "But I'm going, with or without help, because that man up there is dying to protect me, and I'll be damned if I let him do it alone." Irina stared at me for a long moment, and I saw her reassessing, seeing past the frightened girl who'd arrived 3 weeks ago to something harder underneath. "Sebastian was right about you," she said finally. "You're stronger than you look." She turned to the others. "Marcus, Thomas, with me. The rest of you stay here and barricade the door once we're through. Don't open it for anyone except Dmitri or myself. Clear?" The wolves nodded, already moving to follow her orders. Irina appropriated a sword from one of the fallen rogues and pressed it into my hands, taking back her own blade. "This is larger than that knife," she said. "You'll need reach if we encounter more resistance. Keep it low and ready. Stay behind me and Marcus. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" I nodded, my hands closing around the unfamiliar weight of the sword. We emerged from the safe room into chaos. The passage leading back to the main palace was littered with bodies. Rogues and palace guards both, their blood mixing on the stone floor. Smoke drifted through the air, acrid and choking, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sounds of fierce combat. Irina set a brutal pace, and I ran to keep up, my formal dress hampering my movement. Marcus and Thomas flanked us, their weapons ready, their senses scanning for threats. We'd made it halfway to the main staircase when we encountered resistance. Not rogues this time, but wolves in unfamiliar colors, organized and well-armed. Mercenaries, I realized with a chill. Someone had hired mercenaries to attack the palace during the rogue diversion. This wasn't random violence, this was assassination. The mercenaries saw us at the same moment we saw them. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then Irina was moving, her blade singing through the air, and Marcus and Thomas followed suit. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to stay out of the way, while keeping my sword ready. The corridor was too narrow for all of them to fight effectively, bodies pressing close as blades flashed and claws extended. One of the mercenaries broke through, heading straight for me. He was huge, scarred, his eyes cold and professional as he raised his weapon. I didn't have time to think. I brought my sword up, catching his blade with a jarring impact that sent shockwaves up my arms. He was stronger, more skilled, already adjusting his angle for a killing blow. My grandmother's pendant burned against my skin, and I heard her voice as clearly as if she stood beside me. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being terrified and choosing kindness anyway. But sometimes kindness meant survival. Sometimes it meant fighting for the people you loved. I dropped low, using my smaller size to my advantage, and drove the sword forward with everything I had. It caught him in the belly, sliding between ribs with sickening ease. His eyes went wide with shock, and he stumbled backward, crashing against the wall. I'd just killed a man. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I might have frozen, might have collapsed under the weight of it, but Irina was there, her hand on my shoulder. "Stay with me," she commanded. "Grief later. Survival now. Move." We ran. Up the main staircase, through corridors I vaguely recognized from Irina's tours, past more bodies and signs of battle. The sounds of combat grew louder as we climbed, centering on the 3rd floor, the royal wing where Dimitri's office and the council chambers were located. We burst through a set of double doors into a scene of absolute chaos. Dimitri stood in the center of the council chamber, surrounded by at least a dozen mercenaries. His shirt was torn and bloody, his left arm hanging at an awkward angle, but he moved with deadly precision, his blade a blur as he held off attackers from all sides. Sebastian fought back to back with him, equally bloodied, equally fierce, but they were overwhelmed. Even as I watched, one of the mercenaries landed a blow that sent Dimitri stumbling. Another moved in for the kill, blade raised. "No!" The scream tore from my throat. Every head in the room turned toward me. The mercenaries, seeing their numerical advantage and fresh targets. Sebastian, his eyes widening with horror at my presence, and Dimitri, his expression cycling through shock, fear, and something that looked like despair. "Elena, run!" he shouted, dispatching the mercenary in front of him and trying to fight his way toward me. But I wasn't running. Not anymore. I stepped fully into the room, Irina and the others at my back, and raised my sword. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. "You want the queen?" I called out, drawing every mercenary's attention. "Then come and take me." The room exploded into motion. The mercenaries came at us like a wave. Irina met them first, her blade a silver arc in the dim light of the council chamber. Marcus and Thomas flanked her, forming a protective barrier, but the sheer number of attackers threatened to overwhelm us within seconds. I raised my sword, my heart hammering, every instinct screaming at me to flee. But I'd meant what I said. I wasn't running anymore. A mercenary broke through our line, his blade aimed at my throat. I parried clumsily, the impact rattling my teeth, but somehow I held. He pressed his advantage, stronger and more skilled, driving me backward. My heel caught on something, a body, debris, I couldn't tell, and I stumbled. He raised his weapon for the killing blow. Then Dimitri was there. He moved like lightning, despite his injuries, slamming into the mercenary with enough force to send them both crashing into the wall. The mercenary's head cracked against stone with a sickening sound, and he crumpled. Dimitri spun immediately, putting himself between me and the rest of the attackers, his damaged arm hanging useless, but his good arm still gripping his blade with deadly competence. "Behind me," he growled, and the alpha command in his voice was undeniable. But I'd come too far to hide behind him now. "Together," I said, stepping up beside him. "We fight together." For a heartbeat, he stared at me with those storm-gray eyes, and I saw everything in that look: fear for my safety, pride at my courage, love so fierce it took my breath away. Then he nodded once, and we turned to face the remaining mercenaries side by side. The battle became a blur. I stopped thinking, stopped questioning, let instinct and desperation guide my movements. My sword work was clumsy compared to Dimitri's lethal grace or Irina's brutal efficiency, but I was fast and small and harder to hit than they expected. When a mercenary lunged at Dimitri's blind side, I was there. When another tried to flank Irina, I drove my blade into his leg, sending him stumbling into Marcus's waiting weapon. I wasn't skilled, but I was stubborn, and I refused to watch the people I cared about die. Gradually, impossibly, the tide began to turn. More palace guards arrived, drawn by the sounds of combat, swelling our numbers. The mercenaries, realizing their assassination attempt had failed, began to retreat. Some tried to flee through the windows. Others attempted to fight their way to the doors. None made it. When the last mercenary fell, the sudden silence was deafening. I stood in the center of the carnage, my borrowed sword dripping red, my dress ruined beyond recognition, my entire body shaking with adrenaline and shock. Then Dimitri's hand was on my shoulder, turning me gently to face him. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, urgent, his good hand moving over me with desperate care, checking for injuries. "Elena, look at me. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." The words came out distant, dreamlike. "I killed someone. Maybe more than one. I can't remember exactly. Hey." He cupped my face with his palm, forcing my eyes to meet his. "Stay with me. You're in shock, but you're safe now. You're safe." "Your arm." I focused on the obvious problem, grateful for something concrete to anchor me. "It's broken. It'll heal." He didn't take his eyes off mine. "Elena, what you did was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid. You could have died. So could you." My voice cracked. "That rogue in the safe room, he said the king falls tonight. This whole thing, the rogues, the safe room attack, it was all designed to separate us, to get you alone and vulnerable. I couldn't just hide while you died." Something in his expression shattered. He pulled me against his chest with his good arm, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe, his face buried in my hair. I felt him trembling, felt the rapid beat of his heart against mine. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "When you appeared in that doorway. When they turned toward you, I thought." His voice broke. "I can't lose you, Elena. I can't." I wrapped my arms around him, careful of his injuries, and held on just as tightly. Around us, the others were securing the chamber, checking bodies, beginning the grim work of cleanup. But in that moment, there was only us, two people who'd nearly lost everything, clinging to each other in the wreckage. "You said you were falling in love with me," I murmured against his chest. "In the training yard, before the alarm." His arms tightened fractionally. "I did. I need you to know something." I pulled back enough to see his face. "I came here expecting a monster. A cold king who would use me and discard my feelings as irrelevant. I was terrified of you." Pain flashed across his features. "Elena, let me finish." I touched his face, my palm against his jaw. "But you weren't what I expected. You gave me space when I needed it. Respect when I'd been taught to expect only demands. You treated me like a person, not property. And somewhere in these past 3 weeks, while I was building walls to protect myself, you slipped through them anyway. His eyes searched mine, hope and fear warring in their depths. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm not falling in love with you. I watched his face begin to close, preparing for rejection, and rushed to finish. I'm saying that I've already fallen, completely, terrifyingly, and I don't want space anymore. I don't want separate rooms and careful distance. I want... He kissed me. Not the chaste press of lips from our wedding ceremony, but something deep and desperate and real. His hand tangled in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss, and I melted into him, pouring everything I felt into the contact. Need and love and the fierce joy of being alive, of having survived, of having found something precious in the last place I'd expected. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I love you, he said, clear and certain. I've been half in love with you since the wedding, since I saw you walk down that aisle with your chin raised and courage blazing in your eyes. I've been fully in love with you since the first night, when you fell asleep with tears on your face, and I realized I'd do anything, sacrifice anything, to see you smile instead. Then stop sacrificing, I said. Stop protecting me from yourself. I choose this. I choose you, and I need you to choose me back, completely, without guilt or reservation. Elena. My name was a prayer and a promise. Are you sure? You're so young and You're the man I love. I cut him off firmly. Age is just a number. What matters is this. I pressed my hand over his heart. What matters is that you see me, really see me, and still choose me. What matters is that when I'm with you, I feel like I'm becoming who I was always meant to be. He kissed me again, softer this time, reverent, like I was something sacred. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. Then I choose you, he said. Today, tomorrow, for the rest of my life, I choose you, Elena, my queen, my mate, my love, your majesties. Irina's voice, carefully neutral but tinged with amusement, interrupted the moment. As much as I hate to intrude, we have wounded who need attention, prisoners who need interrogating, and a palace that needs securing. Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private. I felt heat flood my cheeks, suddenly remembering we had an audience. Several guards were studiously examining the walls and ceiling, clearly trying to give us privacy. Sebastian stood near the door with a massive grin splitting his face. Told you, he mouthed at Dimitri. Dimitri's response was a gesture that made Sebastian's grin widen further. The next hours passed in organized chaos. Healers arrived to tend the wounded. Dimitri's arm was set and wrapped, though it would take days to fully heal even with our accelerated abilities. The mercenary survivors were taken to the dungeons for interrogation. Palace guards swept every corridor and room, ensuring no threats remained. I stayed by Dimitri's side through it all, and he kept me close with his good arm, as if afraid I might disappear if he let go. It was Sebastian who brought us the information we needed, appearing in Dimitri's office near midnight with a grim expression. Got one of them to talk, he said without preamble. The mercenaries were hired by the Blackthorn Pack. They've been planning this for months. The rogue recruitment, the coordination, everything. They wanted to destabilize the Crescent Moon leadership and seize control of the territory. Blackthorn. Dimitri's voice went cold. Connor Blackthorn has been pushing for expansion into our borders for years. I should have seen this coming. You were distracted. Sebastian's eyes flicked to me with knowing amusement. Understandably so, but the important thing is we stopped them. Their mercenaries are captured or dead, their rogue allies scattered, and Connor himself was stupid enough to be recognized at the planning meetings. We have witnesses. Then we have grounds for retribution. Dimitri's hand tightened on my waist. I want the council convened at dawn. Blackthorn will answer for this attack. Already arranged. Sebastian hesitated, then added more gently, You should rest, both of you. The palace is secure, the immediate threat is neutralized. Everything else can wait until morning. Dimitri nodded slowly. Thank you, Sebastian, for everything. That's what brothers are for. Sebastian clasped Dimitri's shoulder carefully, mindful of his injuries. Then he turned to me and bowed, a gesture of genuine respect, not mockery. "My queen, you fought with honor today. I'm proud to serve you." The words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Sebastian, for pushing us when we were too stubborn to see what was right in front of us." His grin returned. "Someone had to. Now go. Get some sleep. Try not to traumatize the healers by reopening those wounds." Finally, hours after the attack began, Dimitri and I made our way back to the royal chambers. The palace was quiet now, guards posted at every entrance, the damage being assessed and repaired. Tomorrow would bring meetings and politics and consequences, but tonight was ours. We entered the suite, and for the first time since our wedding night, there was no tension between us. No walls, no careful distance. Dimitri locked the door and turned to face me, and the heat in his eyes made my breath catch. "Elena?" He crossed to me slowly, giving me time to retreat if I wanted. "I meant what I said, about choosing you, about loving you. But I need to know." I kissed him, cutting off the question. When I pulled back, I smiled. "I choose you too, completely. I want to be your wife in every way, not just on paper. You're sure?" His hand came up to cup my cheek. "We can wait, as long as you need." "I'm sure." I turned my head to press a kiss to his palm. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be yours, and I want you to be mine." The last traces of control in his expression crumbled. He kissed me deeply, pouring weeks of restrained desire and emotion into the contact. His good arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him, and I felt the evidence of his want pressing against my hip. "Bedroom," he murmured against my lips. "Now." We stumbled toward the bedroom together, kissing and touching, stripping away clothing with clumsy urgency. His injured arm limited his movements, but I helped, my fingers learning the planes of his body. The scars that marked his skin, the strength in his muscles, the way he shuddered when I touched him in certain places. When we finally fell into the bed together, skin against skin, he paused to look at me. The moonlight streaming through the windows painted him in silver and shadow, turning him into something almost ethereal, despite the very physical reality of his body over mine. "I love you," he said again, as if he couldn't say it enough. "My beautiful, brave Elena. I love you too," I whispered back. "My king, my Dimitri." He claimed me then, gently at first, mindful of my inexperience, building the pleasure between us slowly until I was gasping his name. The mating bond, which had been dormant since our wedding, suddenly blazed to life, a golden thread connecting us soul to soul, heart to heart, making us truly one. When we finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, both breathing hard, the bond humming contentedly between us, I felt utterly complete. "No more separate rooms?" I asked sleepily, my head pillowed on his chest. "Never again." His good arm tightened around me. "From now on, where you sleep, I sleep. Where you go, I follow. We're in this together, Elena, always." "Always," I echoed, the word a vow. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony overlooking the main courtyard, watching the controlled chaos of the harvest festival preparations below. The autumn air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of spiced cider and roasting meat from the festival grounds. Music drifted up from the lower levels, the traditional songs of the season, played by talented musicians who'd traveled from across the territory for the celebration. Strong arms wrapped around me from behind, and I leaned back into Dimitri's embrace with a smile. "You're supposed to be resting," he murmured, his lips brushing my temple. "Irina will have my head if she finds out I let you stand out here in the cold." "Irina worries too much," but I didn't move from his arms. Besides, I wanted to see everything. This is my first harvest festival as queen, and you've planned every detail beautifully. Pride colored his voice. "The decorations, the entertainment, the feast. It's going to be spectacular." Below, I could see wolves from dozens of packs arriving for the celebration. The festival had become a symbol of unity after the attack, a way to strengthen alliances and demonstrate the Crescent Moon Pack's continued strength. The Blackthorn Pack was notably absent. Connor Blackthorn had been exiled along with his co-conspirators, their territory absorbed into neighboring packs who'd had no part in the assassination plot. Justice had been served. Peace, tentative but real, had been established. "How are you feeling?" Dimitri's hand moved to rest on my still flat stomach, and the tenderness in the gesture made my heart swell. "Good." I covered his hand with mine. "The healer says everything is progressing perfectly. We discovered the pregnancy 2 weeks ago. A surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have been given how thoroughly we'd embraced our bond." The news had sent Dimitri into a spiral of protective panic and joy that was endearing in its intensity. "I still can't believe it," he said softly. "A child. Our child. Scared?" I teased gently. "Terrified." His honesty made me smile. "I'm going to be a father at 42. I'm going to be old enough to be my own child's grandfather." "You're going to be wonderful." I turned in his arms to face him. "You're kind, patient, protective without being stifling. Our baby is going to be so loved." He kissed me softly, "because their mother is the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Beautiful, brave, compassionate, everything I never knew I needed. Flatterer, truth-teller." His expression grew serious. "Elena, I know this past few months have been difficult. Learning to be queen, recovering from the attack, navigating pack politics while pregnant has been the happiest time of my life." I interrupted. "Yes, it's been challenging. Yes, there are days when I feel overwhelmed, but I wouldn't change any of it, because I have you. We have each other. We do." He rested his forehead against mine, and through the bond, I felt the depth of his love, constant, unwavering, as solid as stone and as warm as sunlight. My Omega, my queen, my everything. And you're mine. I stood on my toes to kiss him properly. My alpha, my king, my love. Below, the festival preparations continued. Inside, I knew Sebastian and Irina would be coordinating the final details, managing the influx of visiting dignitaries with their usual efficient competence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. Politics and pack dynamics never truly rested. But standing there in Dimitri's arms, feeling the bond between us pulse with love and the tiny flutter of new life growing inside me, I felt only gratitude. I'd come to this palace as a frightened girl, sold to secure a treaty, certain I was walking into a cage. Instead, I'd found freedom, purpose, love beyond anything I'd imagined possible. I'd found home. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the first stars began to appear, diamonds scattered across darkening velvet. Dimitri's arms tightened around me, and I leaned into his strength, content in a way I'd never thought possible. "Ready to face the masses?" he asked eventually, knowing we couldn't hide up here forever. "With you beside me?" I smiled up at him. "Always." We walked back inside together, hand in hand, king and queen, alpha and omega, two souls who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from duty and necessity. And as the harvest festival began in earnest below, filling the palace with light and laughter and music, I touched my grandmother's pendant, still warm against my skin, and sent a silent thank you to the woman who'd taught me that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was being terrified and choosing kindness anyway. It was choosing love, even when the world said it was impossible. It was choosing to fight for the people and the future you believed in, and in the end, that choice had transformed everything.